millions thought Yu Menglong's demise was accidental. However, freshly disclosed examinations reveal that his body began to break down hours before anything happened. Beijing's winter air pressed hard against the windows of the peaceful examination wing, which is generally reserved for routine exams and administrative calm. However, on that day, the atmosphere changed into something considerably more uncomfortable, eventually escalating into a national storm. The first leak came from an anonymous source who remained hidden behind encrypted communications and deliberate quiet. The documents given were brief, unrefined, but had deadly implications. What should have been a routine examination of vital signs, reflexes, and psychological stability revealed anomalies that contradicted common medical rationale. Within hours, the files had passed via private servers, digital hallways, and into the hands of experts who scrutinized every detail with growing concern. The data revealed inconsistencies that no established specialty in conventional medicine could explain. Heart rate fluctuations occurred prior to any reported stressor. Neurological pulses that appeared to predict impact. Cortisol surges arose before any external cause. It was as if the body had engaged in a secret collapse ritual, with each physiological marker revealing an impending peril. Experts who analyzed the leaked material described it as a reverse history, with the body responding to stress before it even existed. The repercussions were serious. If accurate, the phenomenon called into question the basic foundations of therapeutic understanding. Was the data corrupted? Was it manipulated? Or was it proof of subtle and deliberate meddling permeating the surroundings around Yu Menglong in ways that went beyond ordinary comprehension? The psychiatric assessment added to the enigma. Standard evaluation papers, sketching tasks, and verbal responses appeared to be typical on the surface. However, when examined using advanced pattern recognition software and cross-referenced with encrypted personal notes, faint symmetries revealed. Repetitions. Word placements that were too perfect. Irregular spacing caused mirrored timestamps in the medical logs. Those researching the patterns began to speak cautiously, even hesitantly, about something that resembled a coded distress signal hidden inside conventional test results. It suggested intent. It suggested awareness. Outside the interview room, the city went about its business as usual, unaware that a single batch of leaked data had already raised concerns that may shake public perception and institutional authority. Those close to the case whispered that the leaks were just the beginning. The exams revealed more than just inexplicable biological reactions. They also indicated breaches in the layers around an individual who may have been tracked far more carefully than anyone realized. And while analysts proceeded to investigate the abnormalities, another file surfaced with far more worrisome information than the first breach. It identified movements, transactions, and shadowy relationships that did not fall within the scope of a conventional medical evaluation. The next discovery would take the probe well beyond medicine, entwining it in a web of surveillance, influence, and invisible characters waiting in the dark. The corridor leading to the examination chamber had the sterile aroma of disinfectant and buzzing ventilation, yet the room itself had an odd tension, as if the walls contained echoes of something unheard. A series of medical assessments were secretly documented, filed, and sealed hours before Yu Menglong collapsed in public. At first sight, they resembled the thousands of routine evaluations completed in Beijing each month. However, when the breach occurred and the documents reached independent analysts, the patterns within those readings revealed a disturbing tale that no one had expected. The first irregularity emerged in a series of cardiovascular logs. Yu Menglong's heart rate had risen to levels associated with an acute threat response in the absence of an external stimulus. The spike was sharp, controlled, and curiously rhythmic, without the chaotic characteristic associated with panic or intense physical exertion. It dissipated just as fast, leaving behind a path of molecular anomalies. Cortisol levels measured at the same time period coincided perfectly with the surge, resulting in a synchronized rise in stress markers that should only occur during times of imminent danger. However, eyewitness testimony and security recordings show that Yu Menglong was sitting comfortably in a chair, waiting for his next test. The sequence repeated again later in the day, this time preceding what would subsequently be documented as his body entering a pre-collapse trajectory. Neurological scans detected tiny electrical anomalies, which resembled subtle alerts sent across the neural network. Analysts regarded these signals as anticipatory, indicating that the body was preparing for a future trauma. When plotted on a time graph, the readings revealed a terrifying picture. The body acting as if it were rehearsing the collapse, repeating the physiological choreography hours before any observable occurrence. Medical specialists who analyzed the evidence proposed a variety of explanations, none of which fit comfortably with mainstream science. Some hypothesized an extreme psychosomatic response, a mental imprint so strong that the body manifested its own warning of risk. Others, however, immediately disputed this, emphasizing the anomaly's consistency and the lack of external stress symptoms. Several analysts theorized about environmental manipulation, citing electromagnetic interference and biological exposure. The facility's logs, however, showed no detectable environmental anomalies. The larger question remained, was this an internal reaction, a subconscious signal stored into Yu Menglong's biological framework, or the result of circumstances beyond his control? The statement of a former hospital employee contributed to the sense of anxiety. The individual indicated that the irregularities were apparent even before the entire report was written. During routine tests, they noticed changes in Yu Menglong's vital signs that did not match movement, emotion, or external stimuli. It gave the appearance that a body was responding to an invisible threat. The employee characterized the experience as witnessing a warning that did not belong to the present. Analysts began to scrutinize Yu Menglong's life timeline in the weeks preceding the examination, in addition to the physiological irregularities. Travel records revealed brief, unexplained trips to remote locales on the outside of Beijing. Financial statements revealed modest but irregular transfers between minor accounts, none of which were significant enough to provoke official suspicion, but frequent enough to suggest coordination. Communications, while generally routine, had timestamps that corresponded to the stress indicators reported in the medical data. These overlapping indications created the outline of a concealed structure, implying that Yu Menglong's daily existence was not as random or private as it appeared. The deeper the detectives looked, the more purposeful the abnormalities seemed. Nothing pointed definitively to an attacker, saboteur, or manipulator, but the convergence of facts suggested that Yu Menglong may have been operating inside an influence structure that he did not completely grasp. It created the disquieting idea that he had been monitored proactively rather than reactively, with someone following him on a timetable that predicted or planned his biological responses. The final piece of the early analysis came from an omitted area of the report. A brief remark from an attending physician noting that Yu Menglong appeared distant, unfocused, and aware of something that had not yet happened. The physician attributed this to simple weariness. In retrospect, the comment reads like the opening line of a warning that no one recognized. The convergence of physiological irregularities, behavioral pieces, and unexplained motions led to a single reasonable conclusion. The investigation did not uncover random abnormalities. It signaled the start of a larger, more complex conundrum, implying that the collapse was never a spontaneous event, but rather the visible result of an invisible chain unfolding underneath him. The initial wave of popular outrage did not develop gradually. It detonated. Within minutes of the original release, social platforms across China surged, overwhelming monitoring systems. hashtags mentioning pre-collapse anomalies and predictive stress signals spread at a rate often reserved for national disasters. Clips of Yu Menglong's previous interviews, fan gatherings, and award ceremonies resurfaced in quick succession as users scrutinized every motion and pause, looking for clues that he had been silently signaling anguish long before the investigations revealed anything. The algorithms reacted swiftly, reinforcing each speculative thread. Some articles parsed the released files with near-clinical accuracy, emphasizing timestamps when physiological data deviated from normal human patterns. Others developed intricate theories about technology, surveillance, and covert interference. The reply demonstrated not only widespread dread, but also a seething yearning to discover a truth that official channels had not yet acknowledged. Mainstream media sources try to approach the situation cautiously. State-affiliated networks termed the claims as incomplete and requiring verification, but the tone of their reportage was tense. Independent media, operating on the outskirts of acceptable boundaries, pushed further. Their narrative included anonymous specialists, whispering analysts, and computer forensic teams who maintained the irregularities could hardly be explained as measuring errors. In these stories, the examination was no longer just a clinical event. It had become a catalyst for exposing flaws within organizations that were supposed to preserve control. The people divided soon. One party, led by Yu Menglong's followers, said that the anomalies indicated he was a target, maybe of a network attempting to manipulate or destabilize him. These supporters produced timelines, digital artifacts, and interviews to portray the case as a gradual encroachment on a person who had unintentionally entered into a broader fight. Some even claimed that the coded messages contained inside the psychological exam were intentional attempts to communicate danger without invoking censorship. Another faction denied any suggestion of a conspiracy. They argued the disclosures were misinterpretations or sensationalized data points, arguing that stress-induced changes could be explained using more standard medical interpretations. Their presence provided a counterbalance, but not a balance. In the lack of conclusive explanations, each argument contributed to a deeper mystery. What fueled the excitement was the discovery of an unexpected element buried within the second round of leaks, a list of people digitally linked to Yu Menglong in the weeks leading up to his fall. Some were known associates. Some were strangers with unverified backgrounds. A few had offshore digital signatures, which cybersecurity specialists tracked to other countries with a history of illicit behavior. The repercussions were immediate and serious. If this is correct, it means that someone outside China has gotten access to encrypted medical records, behavioral logs, and location-based information. Financial analysts joined the discussion next. They detected a consistent pattern of modest, quick transactions linked to anonymous accounts. These transfers aligned too closely with the stress signs in the medical records to be disregarded. Each spike in his vital signs looked to correspond to a transfer or communication hit from an external source. Many observers interpreted this as a coordinated flow of surveillance, with a system mapping and perhaps influencing his movements with terrifying precision. As speculation grew, official silence became louder. The public remarks released were brief, ambiguous, and strictly regulated. They referred to the entire situation as routine health monitoring, which rapidly became the target of online derision. Insiders, however, disseminated competing rumors. Individuals connected to administrative divisions reported that internal conversations had heated behind closed doors. Key players were apparently concerned not with the medical anomalies themselves, but with the ramifications of acknowledging them. This disparity between public fury and institutional caution produced a vacuum that prompted even more speculation. Some journalists speculated that the suppression of information was an attempt to maintain stability. Others suggested that the abnormalities could disclose flaws in systems designed to protect high-profile citizens. A small but rising group believed that the problem went beyond Yu Menglong, implying that similar abnormalities could emerge in other situations if thoroughly studied. The media frenzy peaked when one last piece of leaked material surfaced, a correlation map depicting lines of communication between people in Beijing and numerous offshore hubs. The map was imperfect, fragmented, and partially censored, but it revealed a terrible fact. The events surrounding Yu Menglong were not isolated incidences. They created a network, a system founded on painstaking coordination and secret motives. At this time, the focus moved from analysis to urgency. The oddities were no longer regarded as medical curiosity. They were indications of a bigger mechanism at work, one that put Yu Menglong at the center of a system of observation that was hidden from the public eye. The storm had spun out of control, and the next revelation would lead investigators to a truth far darker than anybody had expected. The breakthrough did not come in the form of a spectacular confession or an unexpected discovery. Instead, it arose from a succession of modest, professional discoveries buried in the psychiatric evaluation files. Experts had spent days examining the patterns in Yu Menglong's responses, thinking the abnormalities to be slight and nearly unintentional. However, one team operating from a private digital forensics center outside Beijing discovered sequences that were too accurate to be ignored. Each repeated sentence, odd spacing, and timed response followed a set cadence similar to encrypted communication. When the analysts reconstructed the pattern, they discovered something far more worrisome than a mere oddity. The comments created a unified message, fragmentary but undeniably planned. The coded sentences indicated not just immediate danger, but also an awareness of being studied through channels that were invisible to those studying the data. The messages conveyed the weight of someone who recognized that traditional modes of communication were no longer secure. Meanwhile, the medical study continued in parallel. Neurological models created from Yu Menglong's scans indicated a series of anticipatory signals that grew in intensity over the day. These signals outperformed traditional stress indicators, demonstrating anticipatory activation of the limbic and autonomic systems. Some specialists believed that the brain was drawing from information that had not yet entered the physical environment, a hypothesis that challenged present scientific knowledge. The body was preparing for injury, not in response to a current threat, but in anticipation of something projected, choreographed, or predicted. As analysts dug further, the distinctions between genetics, psychology, and external influence became increasingly muddled. Data correlation revealed that specific neurological spikes corresponded exactly to timestamps from messages tracked to offshore nodes. Though the contents of the messages remained encrypted, their regularity and timing revealed a purposeful pattern. It was as if someone outside of China had synchronized a series of encounters with Yu Menglong's physiological responses in real time. Investigators then shifted their attention to digital traces that had earlier appeared unimportant. Among them are a series of encrypted emails sent between anonymous people, each with only a few letters or seemingly random punctuation marks. Cybersecurity researchers reassembled the metadata and discovered that the emails came from a cluster of computers known to host covert espionage operations. The signal's journey via numerous nations indicated to an entity with significant technological resources. The trip logs revealed a second layer of evidence. Records revealed that a shadow figure appeared frequently near Yu Menglong on flights, hotel stays, and private events. This person's identity remained unknown, hidden behind fraudulent reservations, manipulated timestamps, and inadequate biometric data. However, their presence corresponded to oscillations in Yu Menglong's stress markers, as if the individual's proximity served as a catalyst or part of a predetermined pattern. The combination of these data formed a disturbing hypothesis. Yu Menglong was not merely monitored, but also integrated into a system meant to forecast, modify, or observe his physiological and psychological states with extreme precision. The oddities were no longer limited to the realm of medical mystery. They alluded to a coordinated network capable of tracking an individual at levels that went beyond legal and ethical norms. This network extended across national lines. Financial transfers to foreign companies coincided with neurological defects discovered during the investigation, implying that the forces involved functioned on a bigger scale than personal targeting. The coordination reflected a greater goal, a system that viewed Yu Menglong as a node inside a bigger structure rather than a subject in itself. The ramifications of such a coordinated effort were startling. If someone could anticipate his breakdown, they could theoretically predict or manage similar events in other people. In the final stage of analysis, a senior consultant examined the combined medical and psychological data. Their conclusion, stated cautiously and without attribution, was stark. The patterns did not result from chance or isolated intervention. The consultant described the convergence as an architecture of observation, one that worked quietly yet relentlessly, constructing a lattice around Yu Menglong that no ordinary citizen could see. The investigation had progressed to the point where the distinctions between victim, witness, and target vanished. Yu Menglong's collapse, once thought to be a single occurrence, suddenly appeared to be the visible terminus of a secret chain spanning countries, technologies, and organizations that rarely connect in public. As investigators prepared to look deeper, fresh records surfaced, pointing to foreign ties, financial distortions, and persons who had hitherto kept hidden from view. Geopolitical complexity, in which established rules no longer fit cleanly with observed reality. The bigger implication became clear. If one individual could be observed, mapped, or controlled with such precision, the phenomenon must extend far beyond a single celebrity. It envisaged a silent infrastructure capable of infiltrating people's intimate lives without their knowledge. The question was no longer whether the anomalies were real, but rather what they said about a system capable of predicting and possibly creating a person's life path. Many onlookers found the lesson sobering. It highlighted the tenuous nature of privacy in a society dominated by data, algorithms, and invisible networks. It presented the prospect that danger can enter a person's life through lines of code, fragmented communications, and choreographed actions that are undetectable by traditional means. It also reminded viewers that the line between fact and perception becomes increasingly thin as information passes through levels of silence, concealment, and competing authority. As additional pieces of evidence emerged, detectives began to plan for a phase of investigation that would go beyond medical files and psychological notes and into the area of international connections and financial problems. The scope grew, as did the stakes. The following chapter promises to dive into the enigmatic foreign ties, financial anomalies, and hidden players who may have organized Yu Menglong's pre-collapse.